You're watching Reality Check. It began with a report by the Reserve Bank of India in June this year, which somewhat surprisingly pointed out that one of the causes of the strain on states' finances are freebies, handouts promised by political parties. Soon after, the Prime Minister no less stepped up an attack on handouts, using the analogy of the free distribution of revaris, a North Indian sweet mithai. Now, courtesy a petition by a BJP leader asking for political parties who promise freebies to be delicensed, a petition backed by the centre, the matter is before the Supreme Court. Now, as we've pointed out on the show, this is a baffling line for the Prime Minister and indeed his government to take, given that one of the contributing factors of the BJP's political success is widely believed to be on the back of mega welfare schemes, often with the Prime Minister's personal branding, ranging from outright free handouts to subsidized benefits. For example, PM Kisan 2018, 6,000 rupees a year to farmers free, a budget of almost 70,000 crores. PM Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana in 2020, 5 kg free food grains every month to the poor during the pandemic, a budget of 80,000 crores, still continuing by the way. Swachh Bharat Abhiyan of 2014, subsidies for building toilets, 7,200 crores. Swachh Bharat rural numbers these are. PM Ujjwala Yojana, which was free gas cylinders in phase 1 and 1 free refill and stove in phase 2 with a budget of 800 crores. The Awas Yojana PM, 1.2 lakh to 1.5 lakh rupees subsidies for building houses with a budget of about 50,000 crores. Now, this is the same also in BJP rule states. Just take these recent announcements like BJP run Uttar Pradesh ahead of the 2022 election promised free scooties to girls, free power to farmers, free LPG cylinders. Madhya Pradesh in March of this year, a one-time waiver of electricity bills valued at about 6,400 crores. BJP run Himachal Pradesh, 125 units of free electricity to consumers. Regardless, here we are amid a debate on freebies, a debate where key questions still remain unclear and fiercely contested. How does one even define a freebie? How is it different from welfare? An increasing number of opposition parties have pushed back against the PM-BJP line, saying what they are doing is indeed welfare. Does the court have the jurisdiction to weigh in on the framing of political promises and government policy? And finally, are freebies actually a primary cause of bankrupting state finances? To answer these questions and more, we have with us Rajiv Kumar, ex-Vice Chairperson, Niti Aayog versus Praveen Chakravarty, Congress strategist. Thank you all so much for joining in. Rajiv Kumar, let me start with you on the first point about what I felt was a very baffling line that, as I mentioned, this government seems to have taken on this whole freebie or reverie culture, which, as I pointed out, is such an intrinsic part of this government's economic policy and political project.
Hi Vasu, glad to be here, but I'm a bit surprised to note that you are baffled by what's happened with the government policy and the Prime Minister's schemes.
Okay.
Because as you said yourself, I think as you hinted at least, which is that you have to distinguish between what is now being called freebies versus merit subsidies. And merit subsidies are those which definitionally which have positive externalities. Now all the schemes that you talked about, if I go one by one, etc., you will notice have significant positive externalities, and transfer payments in any economy, especially in a democratic economy, are indeed necessary, because there are inequalities, there are inequities, there are people, there are segments of population who need these transfer payments to improve not only just their welfare, but also to help improve their productivity.
No, but
whether
hold on.
It is toilets or it is houses. Hang on, or it is houses, or it's Ujjwala Yojana, etc. All of these go on to improve, as it were, the levels of productivity and health and other aspects of people's life.
But how is that different?
And then most of these Yeah, they are different because they are not they are different because they are not merely subsidizing consumption and sometimes wasteful consumption,
Okay.
which then leads to no externalities and are therefore just a drain
So what is
on the public
no? So
fisc.
so once
with
again,
no,
I'm not clear.
with
What
no effective
what
output.
What then? What are the free handouts which you are saying are wasteful? Because this current government, as well as BJP-run state governments, are doing virtually the same as everyone else. They're giving both free cash, they're giving free food grains, free or subsidized toilets, gas cylinders, houses. What is who is doing the wasteful stuff, and what is the wasteful stuff?
No, I remember, Vasu, I remember the time when I was in the government between 92 to 95, and the finance minister then had got all the states to agree to a minimum tariff on power of 50 paise per unit, irrespective to whom it was supplied. And I remember and everybody had agreed to that. But after that came, I forget the year in which YSR was elected.
Sure.
And the promise that he had made was free power to the farmers. And the first law that he signed in the stadium was to grant free power to the farmer. Now, for me,
yes,
that's not just freebie, but it's bad economics because it leads to external diseconomies. That's led to the water table going down in states after state after state. It led to a water emergency in our country.
Sure.
It's led to the discoms being in the hawk by more than nearly 3 trillion rupees, etc. That's an example of a freebie which is completely not required.
I'm coming to Praveen because I have to go to Praveen. But before I do that, I'm glad you brought up power, because here's the surprising thing about power, and we've got the graphic on this. This is across all parties, across time, across states, including the BJP, right? Everyone is deep in debt to power companies because they're all, hold on a second, let me finish. They all are promising free to subsidized power. Look at those numbers on the scale. Maharashtra, which is now BJP run, is the biggest with about 22,000 crores in debt. We have Uttar Pradesh 8,000 crores, Madhya Pradesh 5,800 crores, Karnataka about 4,000 crores, Gujarat 900 crores. These are all in the top 10 or dozen most indebted states.
But
so this is not a one party problem.
You are unfair in not hang on. You are being unfair in not pointing out all the opposition governments in the states which are deeply in debt, led by Rajasthan and by Punjab.
No, of course they are. But
hang on.
I'm saying only BJP because it's the center which is targeting free power culture. Yeah.
As an economist, the free power culture, as I said, was started off by YSR. And before that, there was an agreement, there was a consensus among the state governments, and we worked hard to drive that consensus. And Gujarat then went on to show that this could be done. But that consensus was broken, completely in some sense, without any care, by the person concerned. Now the question is that irrespective of which party is in power or etc., there is a case for merit subsidies and there is zero case for demerit subsidies, especially for subsidies which cause external negative externalities.
All right, Praveen Chakravarty, do you think that there is something that distinguishes merit from demerit subsidies, and what do you make of the fact that when it comes to something like power, which by the way the Prime Minister himself has hinted at and has been part of the centre's affidavit in the Supreme Court, no one has the moral or the political or the financial high ground?
Yes, first, happy Vinayak Chaturthi to everybody who's celebrating. I know my friend Rajiv does. I think, this whole issue of freebies versus welfare, merit versus non-merit, and state finances have to be put in some context. See, I think there are various things we're trying to unpack in this issue. The Prime Minister raising this as an issue was meant more from a political party announcing freebies during an election, before an election, presumably in the context of the Gujarat election that is coming up. So is the problem that political parties are promising such things in quote unquote to bribe voters before an election? That's number one. Number two,
Praveen, you are giving a spin to it, which is not.
Okay,
required.
okay.
No,
Sir,
Please don't. I don't think
let him
that's
finish.
the right spin to give.
Mr. Kumar, let him finish. Let him finish. Let him finish.
The second
I
one
know, but
is
I mean,
about merit versus non-merit, which is freebie versus welfare. Let me give you an example. So let us say a developed state like Kerala or Tamil Nadu decide that they will provide free internet to everybody because free roads and roads and other infrastructures were far better developed in these states than say states like Uttar Pradesh or Bihar. Now, is free internet freebie or welfare? And the argument I'm going to make is today's freebie may be tomorrow's welfare. A poor state's freebie may be a rich state's welfare. So it is a futile debate to go down, and it's very slippery to go down this path about what is a freebie and what is a welfare.
Okay.
And I understand Rajiv's the economic definition of merit and non-merit, but Rajiv, I'm sure you would agree with me, the 1950s public finance definition of merit and non-merit perhaps do not hold any longer. So the question, this is an impossible distinction. All we have to do is, in a democracy, we have to think of this as a social contract between the political party and the voters. Right. Now, as regards to the state finances, and I think that is a legitimate issue. I think state finances are in peril. They are deeply worried, and the union government and the union finance minister is right to worry about the fiscal condition of states. But then, to dictate to the states what they can spend on and what they cannot spend on will not work in a democracy like ours, especially in a democracy with such political diversity. Okay. So we have gone down into this debate of your freebie is better than my freebie and your power is better than my power, and we started it in 95 and all of that. That is not going to solve the crux of the problem, which is the problem of fiscal condition of states.
Okay. All right. Let's get Rajiv Kumar to respond. Starting with Rajiv Kumar, the point about where do you draw the line between what you say is a quote-unquote good versus bad freebie? You mentioned PAR. Let's set PAR aside for a moment, because as we've just said, everyone is a sinner when it comes to PAR, and it actually predates this whole freebie debate. If one looks at actual other examples which are cited, like Praveen spoke about Wi-Fi, this government has been saying, it's not just about food grains, it's going to be gas cylinders, it's going to be houses, it's going to be toilets. Again, each of these could be argued and questioned as to where you draw the line.
Vasu, drawing the line is what Praveen said is given to you by the budget constraint. And that budget constraint is a real one. And that is the one which we had hoped that and this government has been committed to, unlike many others, to getting back to the lines drawn by the FRBM Act. Let me say a couple of things. One, PAR, not everybody is a sinner. And there are states like Gujarat which are not in the hawk, and there are states like Himachal which are not in the hawk. So let's remember that it is possible. Two, I think the Prime Minister has done an amazing thing by raising this issue, because the issue is about competitive populism versus competitive good governance, or competitive good delivery of the welfare services and goods that you have. So I think that debate is essential. And I think by raising that issue in the public domain, he has caused this debate and discussion which is necessary to sensitize the people and sensitize the middle class. Hang on. As Abhijit said, just one second. Sure. The biggest freebie is the 65,000 crore subsidy that freight traffic gives to passenger traffic. And as Abhijit Banerjee pointed out long ago, a large number of these freebies go towards the middle class, and therefore it is important that the middle class understands that there are fiscal constraints to what they demand and what they take for as entitlement and as given.
Hold on. Now, one second.
About the internet, etc.
Let me just come in for a second. When you say that the Prime Minister has raised this, of course the Prime Minister is free to raise anything. But the point where it becomes political as opposed to a genuine policy intervention is because his anxiety seems to have been triggered by the fact that one of his main political rivals, the Aam Aadmi Party, essentially inaugurates every election campaign by saying we'll do free power, free water, etc., etc. That seems to be the predominant concern which has led him to mention Revdi culture. He doesn't seem to have the same anxiety when whether it's a central government or it's all his own governments in the states are making similar promises. As I just gave you the example, you've got Uttar Pradesh saying free scooters, you've got Madhya Pradesh waiving electricity bills. So when you're selective in raising the debate, then it gets political, right? Then it's
I don't think, but I can't comment on this, and I don't want to make this a party political or an election issue, etc. And I'm sure that the Prime Minister raising it the manner he did was about raising the issue about, as I said, merit versus non-merit subsidies, and the fact that, for example, the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan or the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana were not part of the election manifesto or promises by the BJP for 2014. Certainly not. They were not. For example, the Har Ghar Mein Jal was not a promise. And as Praveen points out in his own articles, parties which promise the earth and throw the whole sink at of subsidies don't necessarily always win. He has pointed out himself.
That's a separate point.
People promising, just a minute. So it's not a Therefore, I think it will be responsible for us to not make this into a political issue, but to keep it to an economic issue, which is what it is, and this is what the country needs.
But
a convergence on the fact that
the fact is, the reason you can't, you can't separate,
fiscally irresponsible handouts are not good.
Sir, the fact is you can't separate it from politics because, as you said, the Prime Minister is the one who raised it, and the Prime Minister raised it in a political context. He said there are other parties which promise this Revdi culture, implying the BJP doesn't and others do, and that's the frame in which it has played itself out. A BJP leader goes to the Supreme Court saying de-license political parties that have promised freebies, the centre supports him. So one can't entirely separate it from that lens. But I want to come back to the other question. But let me just come back to
the RBI.
Sorry? The RBI.
Yeah. It was raised by the RBI initially.
Yes, it was raised. It was raised by the
politics.
It was raised by the RBI, and let's get Praveen's take on that, because the RBI was, in a sense, Mr. Kumar is right. They cast the first stone, as it were. I think it was in June that they came up with this report where they said that freebies, subsidies in general are going up, and freebies are part of this, that these are sort of problematic, and they drew that distinction, Praveen, where I'm sure you read the report, but for the benefit of viewers, they said broadly what can be called as quote-unquote good welfare is, subsidized or free food, health, education, but free power, water, etc. takes you into worrying territory, and that's putting a strain on state finances.
Yeah. See, I think, let me make a few points. I think first I want to respond to Rajiv's competitive populism versus competitive good governance. And Rajiv, that's where I think, in my view, it gets a little tricky, because that is what turned this debate political. Because Tamil Nadu is often held up as the poster child for this freebie culture. But Tamil Nadu has turned around and argued, what are you talking about? We are one of the most developed states. We have done the best in this country. Our per capita income is 5 times that of Bihar or UP. So who are you to tell us what is, what is good governance and what is not? So, and that is why I feel that is a slippery slope. The real question is one of state finances, and I've read the RBI report. And I think this is where the RBI, in my view, makes a mistake. RBI has 21 times it uses the word freebies in that report of June 2022. RBI's problem should be state finances. The moment an unelected, unaccountable body starts to dictate to elected state governments on what they should spend on, then it becomes problematic in a federal democracy and a federal republic. I am sure you agree with me, Rajiv, that in a federal democracy like ours,
sure,
RBI should have stuck to the fact that, and should have stuck to the basics and said, listen, Punjab, Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, your borrowing is very, very high. Now, you have two consequences to face. One, we are not going to open up a fresh borrowing window for you, or your cost of borrowing is going to go very, very high. But you can't turn around and say what you can spend on and what you cannot spend on.
Right.
Then, at that point, it turns political.
Okay. You know, it's interesting because the RBI report also has a bit of a contradiction. I'm giving you a chance to respond. I'm giving you a chance to respond. The RBI report also has a bit of a contradiction because it actually says that while it talks about this kind of concern, alarmism over freebies, pressure on state finances, it says that the financial risk that freebies pose to high debt states is actually quote unquote moderate. So it seems to almost underplay the sort of panic button itself that it has pressed.
That is correct. And it's being unnecessarily alarmist because it also says in its own report, it is impossible to define
So the big strain, and Rajiv Kumar, you would have seen this, the Arvind Subramanian piece that came out a few weeks ago. The biggest strain he points out is the debt to the distribution companies, DISCOMs. He says that is almost, the actual percentage is close to 3% of GDP. That's the huge load which is causing the strain. And that's really a problem. That's somewhat separate to the political sort of the handout. But I want to ask you, Rajiv Kumar, about the governance aspect. Because you said there's sort of good governance versus competitive populism. People like Arvind Subramanian are making an argument that it's actually the reverse when it comes to this government, what he calls the new welfarism of the Modi government. He says that actually the fact that the Modi government is part of now this trend of distributing toilets, gas cylinders, even giving direct cash, is actually proof of the fact that the government has conceded that it is failing to deliver those services which it is meant to, like health and education, which are complex, difficult. It's difficult to improve health, it's difficult to improve education overnight. So it's much easier to actually just hand out these hard, physical assets to people. It's easier to track and build a toilet as opposed to improving primary education.
Vasu,
and the state is withdrawing from that and is instead going down this path.
No, Vasu, give me a break. This is complete balderdash. This is nonsense.
Okay.
I mean, and Arvind Subramanian was in the government as a chief economic advisor between 2014 to 2017 or something like that. So those years when these things were done. This is it is complete nonsense because the government is focusing on improving health. After all, what is Ayushman Bharat? 500 million people been given free medical insurance, up to I think 4 or 5 lakhs per family. What is that if it is not health? I mean, the government has come up with the national education policy, which is revamping, recasting, redoing from 0 to 12. The higher education, the education policy. They are revamping the Anganwadis. States after states are trying to improve that. And health, education at all levels, etc. I mean, how many AIMS have been opened in these 8 years? The All India Institute of Medical Sciences then were opened in the last so many years, etc. So I think Arvind Subramanian is on a very slippery path, and I don't think. Hang on, and therefore he shouldn't say that.
But I'm saying, why is it then? Because he cites the example of stunting. I want to respond to that. That the actual, if you look at our health and education indices, they remain worryingly poor. And he cites the example of stunting to show that as an index
I know.
of well-being and of health.
I have read the NFHS 5 report.
We perform very poorly.
I have read the NFHS 5 report.
Yeah.
I know I have read, and this has been the burden of my song for a long time, and I am glad that the Prime Minister has taken it up in his Mann Ki Baat recently. Malnourishment remains a problem, but the point is that government has gone and moved on that, for malnourishment, and there is a real-time now database in the Ministry of Child and Women Welfare, which shows the direct performance of 11 lakh Anganwadi that are there in the government. Was never done before. So these takes time. And I myself started a project in Niti Aayog in 15 districts of UP, where the point is that the awareness about poshan is so little.
Okay.
The distinction between food and nutrition, for 70 years people haven't bothered to work on that. But let me just come back to what Praveen said. about Tamil Nadu being 5 times the per capita. Hang on.
Yes.
The thing is, nobody is arguing against the necessity of transfer incomes in a democratic, open market, private economy, because those are necessary to make sure that the lowest, at the bottom of the pyramid,
yes,
people get the benefits of the growth that is happening.
Right.
But that has nothing to do with the fact about competitive populism, because competitive populism still drives.
But hold on. But it is, because that's.
Subsidies,
but Mr. Kumar, again, when you say but hold on.
No.
Tamil Nadu is exactly held up as an example of that you distribute free laptops, mixer, grinder, TV sets, etc., etc. It is in fact the poster boy of competitive populism, which is why they say that how do you reconcile that with the fact that we are actually a high-performing state?
But if I may,
most of the time.
Okay, all right. Sorry, we're going completely over. I'm told it's such a engrossing debate. The last word from you, Praveen. Yes.
Yeah. See, actually, let us, in this context, as we're talking about welfare, let us not forget what people said about Narega, Mahatma Gandhi Narega, including the Prime Minister, that it was, everybody derided that, if you remember. Now, during the pandemic, 110 million people were dependent on Narega. Right. What was supposedly called a freebie in 2009, 10, 11 became the source that prevented a potential civil war within the country during the pandemic, because it supported 110 million
All
people.
Right.
So my point is, this is very, very slippery slope to go down. We must control state finances, and that has to be done through an economic policy.
We're completely out of time. Just 10 seconds, Rajiv Kumar. Yes.
You must agree. You must agree that it is important to have this discussion in the public domain and to sensitize people to the fact that mere handouts which do not improve anything and cause external diseconomies are to be curbed and restrained.
All right. Okay. As I said, we are still yet to get a clear fix on what those are, other than power, which is a whole separate debate. But you know what? We'll have both of you back. It's been fascinating. Thank you so much for joining us on Reality Check. Thank you for watching. Good night.